This is VOA's International Edition. Coming up, a sharp backlash erupts over comments by U.S. Republican presidential contender Donald Trump. Dropping oil prices hit the world economy. A computer pioneer runs for Cyber Party president.
Decades ago, McAfee was one of the first people to begin working in the field of antivirus to protect people's home computers from malware and hackers and whatnot.
A whaling adventure hits the movie theaters around the world. These stories and more just ahead. I'm Ray Kugel. In the wake of last week's deadly mass shooting in San Bernardino, California, U.S. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump is calling for, in his words, a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until the country's leaders can figure out what is going on. Appearing on American television Tuesday, Mr. Trump condemned President Obama's efforts in leading the fight against Islamic State militants in the Middle East. He told ABC's Good Morning America, "We are now at war, and we have a president who doesn't want to say that." Mr. Trump is drawing harsh rebuke from Muslim leaders across the country. Dr. Ahmad Jabir, president of the Arab American Association of New York, and Dawood Mosque, called the rhetoric un-American and said it is outrageous that bashing Muslims and Islam is becoming a political norm. Mustafa El-Amin, an imam and Muslim leader in Newark, New Jersey, described the remarks as divisive, outlandish, and hateful. The comments have also ignited a huge political controversy within the United States and beyond. VOA senior political correspondent Jim Malone talked with International Edition's Jim Stevenson about the strong reaction.
And not only that, Jim, around the world, I mean, I've seen reactions coming in now from Bangladesh, from Indonesia. People are now focused on the American election campaign and the personage of Donald Trump specifically, and this has become a lightning rod issue right now. He's really created a political firestorm. It's being condemned not only by his Republican presidential rivals, but also certainly Hillary Clinton and a number of the Democrats have spoken out against this. The White House spokesman, Josh Earnest, basically said today that it was disqualifying for Trump to even seek the presidency to advocate such a proposal as he's put forward.
Pretty strong words coming out of the White House. You usually don't hear that in response to a political challenger, especially when it's somebody who's not directly challenging the person in office.
No, and it also came up at the State Department briefing during the day. So it's obviously going to get huge play internationally. This is going to be the signature world story right now for the American election campaign. And the White House and some of the Democrats are challenging the Republican Party now to sort of back up their admonitions against Trump, to sort of stand against him, if they will. And I must say, there does appear to be a developing dilemma here for the Republican Party, because the latest Marist poll has Hillary Clinton defeating Trump by double digits if they were both nominees of their party. So they've got to start to look at the tea leaves and realize that the more controversial he is, the more they may be digging themselves in a hole for the general election that may be very devastating for the party.
Well, you certainly don't have to go very far, at least in today's news, to find a critic of Donald Trump, and yet his supporters are feverishly backing him, and his numbers, at least among his core group, are pretty impressive as we look to Iowa, which is one of the first states where he's going to be tested.
Yeah, both nationally and in some of the key early states, Trump continues to do well in the polls. Obviously now everyone will be watching these the polls to see what comments they may have on the impact of his election fortunes. A lot of people are speculating, is this the moment now where Trump starts to implode? The problem is, we've thought we've been at that point several times before when he described Mexican immigrants as racist and other examples you can cite. So we're just going to have to wait and see what kind of impact this has on the entire Republican Party. But listen, I mean, he's in the top 1 or 2 in the Iowa polling right now. That'll start February 1st. He leads in the New Hampshire primary, the next big contest, by a wide margin. So if Trump is able to either win, play second in Iowa, and then win in New Hampshire, he could be in the driver's seat for the party nomination.
I've heard some talk that, at least among the Republican voters, Trump really only needs to have about a third, and that's about where he sits right now.
He does, and a lot of people have said it doesn't look like he can push his numbers beyond that maybe he's hit a ceiling. That may be true. The other issue for the Republican Party, who is the alternative right now to Donald Trump? And we know there are many, and it still seems as though this won't really start to sort out until the voting begins. Whether these latest comments will change the direction of the race, too early to know, but certainly it's a very kind of fragile and uncertain time in our politics. And you have someone like Donald Trump who's trying to take advantage of that with his core supporters.
VOA senior political correspondent Jim Malone speaking with International Edition's Jim Stevenson. Social media is all abuzz over Donald Trump's anti-Muslim comments. G. Abby Lee is here to tell us what people are saying. Hi, G.
Hello, Ray. Many people talk about Trump all the time, but it's worth noting it this time around because the latest remark is from a high-level White House official. Josh Earnest, who is the White House press secretary, slammed Trump Tuesday because the presidential hopeful proposed banning Muslim immigrants. Earnest was speaking during a regular briefing and said the comment should disqualify him from serving as president. You can find Earnest on Twitter at PressSec, but the clip is not available on his Twitter page. For that, we have to check out Facebook.
So, G, tell us what you found there and details of what he said.
Sure, many news outlets shared a clip of the briefing, but let's take a look at the ABC News Facebook post. The caption basically states what Earnest said and that he urged other GOP contenders to say they would not support him as a party's nominee.
And there's been a lot of reaction. What's it been like?
Ray, most replies show support for Trump. The reply with the biggest number of likes reads like this. The only reason the Congress or the government doesn't like Trump is because he can't be bought and he can pay his own way through it all. Another person replied with this comment. Being Muslim and not being born in the USA disqualifies Obama as being president. President Obama is a Protestant and was born in the state of Hawaii. All in all, it appears many Trump supporters are happy with his proposal and the bold suggestions are not affecting his popularity.
So tell us about the proposal and where, if we'd like, can we read more about it?
You can check it out on both his website and his Twitter page. Trump tweeted a link to his statement and he wrote, "Just put out a very important policy statement on the extraordinary influx of hatred and danger coming into our country. We must be vigilant." And when you click on that link, you'll find a statement in which he's calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. He's on Twitter at @RealDonaldTrump. Ray?
Thanks, G. The International Edition team would like to hear from you, and you can tweet us your feedback at VOA_IE or to G's account at GAbbyLee. That's JAABBEYLEE. This is VOA.
For more on the stories you've heard on our radio programs, visit our website at voanews.com. That's where you'll find in-depth reports, related stories, videos, and more from our team of correspondents. Or take the news with you by downloading podcasts of your favorite VOA program. That's at voanews.com. Online news for a changing world.
One of the world's great cities, the gateway to America for generations. VOA brings you New York in 12 rarely seen views. Presenting the 2016 VOA calendar, a gift from us free for the asking. Just send us your mailing address in an email to calendar@voanews.com and you can have New York's beauty grace your wall all next year.
This is VOA's International Edition. The U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation says the husband and wife who killed 14 people and wounded 21 others in San Bernardino, California last week practiced shooting before the attack and had been radicalized for some time. The FBI says U.S.-born Syed Rizwan Farouk and his Pakistani wife Tashfeen Malik went to several gun ranges to practice, including once within days of the mass killing at a gathering of local government workers. Charlie Winter is Senior Research Associate at the Transcultural Conflict and Violence Initiative at Georgia State University. He spoke with International Edition's Sarah Williams.
Her background, she'd spent time in Pakistan, and she had studied at this Al-Huda Center. Looking back on it, though, the implications for international security, is there any way that international officials, and particularly those in the United States, when she came here, that would have triggered any red flags?
I think it would be too difficult and take up too many resources if we were to try and figure out the intentions or the future intentions of anyone coming back from attending an institute like that. Of course, it does seem that this will have had some sort of bearing on her future actions, but it's impossible to know if someone coming back from Pakistan and who's been attending a madrasa is necessarily going to be a violent extremist in the future. So it's something that we need to be very careful with. And I think one thing that it does draw attention to is that the fact that there's a term that keeps floating around regarding the San Bernardino attacks, self-radicalization. I don't think that was the case. I think that that's a bit of a misnomer, actually. Clearly, there is a long process at work here and a set of factors, material and otherwise, that have contributed to these individuals' eventual embarking on carrying out the attacks that they did. And saying self-radicalization kind of implies that it happened in a bubble. Evidently, it did not happen in a bubble. And we need to make sure that we get our terminology lined up with the reality in order to avoid kind of making these mistakes again in future.
Why do you say it did not occur in a bubble?
Because in anyone's path towards becoming a radical, violent Islamist, there are external influences, even if these influences are offline or online, if they're not kind of happening in the real world, if they're happening on social media, that kind of thing. That's still an external influence, and it's really important to recognize that someone doesn't just go onto the internet, start kind of plugging into Islamic State propaganda online, and then suddenly, over a period of a few months, become a supporter of Islamic State. It's the human contact that actually leads to that kind of thing. So, yes, propaganda is very important, and Islamic State's propaganda itself is very important in this because it does kind of empower people and make people kind of feel defiant in the face of the status quo, that kind of thing. But the propaganda alone is not the thing which is radicalizing people. It's the kind of purveyors of the jihadist ideology that are convincing individuals to go down this path, this trajectory. They're the issue. They're the kind of outreach officers that we need to be dealing with, as well as propaganda. But we just need to make sure that we look at it as a holistic issue rather than just kind of pinning the blame on social media corporations for letting propaganda be posted on their websites. It's much, much more than that.
So these could be contacts, say, at schools, but also, say, at mosques or friends or other types of contacts as well.
Absolutely, and the list can go on and on and on, and that's one of the things which is most difficult about this, but we have to kind of respect the fact that radicalization is something that cannot be generalized. There are lots and lots of different processes at work here, lots of different relationships that can lead to it.
Charlie Winter, Senior Research Associate at the Transcultural Conflict and Violence Initiative at Georgia State University. He spoke from London with International Edition's Sarah Williams. Crude oil prices fell to their lowest level since 2009 in Tuesday's global trading. The latest in a long string of price plunges follows last Friday's meeting of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries that failed to reach a consensus to cut oil production, keeping daily production at about 32 million barrels. Vandana Hari, a Singapore-based editorial director for Platts, a London-headquartered energy news service, says OPEC's decision came as no surprise. She talked about it with International Edition's Victor Beattie.
I think OPEC has radically altered its strategy. We know that since November. The path that it has embarked on since its somewhat controversial decision of November 2014, to my mind, doesn't really have any U-turns. No fail-safe, face-saving way of capitulating on that. And longer term, well, I can see there's a lot of pain as a result of that. The markets are taking their own time to rebalance. I think longer term, I feel this is good for the markets. Interventionist policies are never very healthy for markets. It's a bit like fuel subsidies. It has a distortionary impact. What's going to happen in the coming months? Yes, there will be possibly more pain and possibly lower prices than what we have seen so far. But as the market rebalances, the right price signals go to the producers and the consumers. And in the long run, that's how you have more efficiency and more robustness in the market.
Is there a glut on the world market today?
Without doubt, there is. Estimates vary. It's not always easy to count every single barrel that is sitting in tanks right now or is in transit and being produced. But estimates are anywhere between 1.5 to 2 million barrels per day is the oversupply right now compared with demand. And, of course, fears that it might get worse in 2016 as the incremental Iranian barrels come on stream as well.
Oil prices are down fluctuating around $40 a barrel. How much farther do you think they might go?
So I personally do not predict, but we have seen some analysts flag a $20 figure out there. It's not impossible. I don't think they will, if they have a major leg down, that they will stay there for any period of time, because I think more and more oil will start shutting in.
Vandana, is the oil glut caused by a series of factors, or is it primarily the revolution in oil fracking in the U.S.?
That's where the story started. Non-OPEC production, as it's called, which is primarily the incremental barrels from tight oil or shale formations in the U.S., was a major factor pushing the world into a glut in 2014. The other part of it was that it was largely unforeseen, so it caught world markets by surprise last year. 2015 has been a story of yet another surprise, which is where U.S. tight oil has proved much more resilient. It is a story of continuous innovation. It's not just a disruptive technology, it's a technology that continues to evolve.
Do you expect then oil prices to slowly return to levels that we saw a few years ago? And what impact is the climate change conference having on oil prices?
We are currently in an oversupply environment of anywhere between 1.5 to 2 million barrels per day, with the potential to exacerbate next year. When it comes to demand, and this is where I think a lot of nervousness is creeping in, we have seen a reasonably healthy rate of demand in 2015. Right now, based on expectations of global economic growth being a little bit better in 2016 compared with 2015, some estimates call for a better demand growth rate in 2016. Personally, I have a lot of question marks on that, and that is driving a lot of nervousness as well.
That's Vandana Hari, editorial director for Singapore-based Platts, a London-headquartered news service. Still to come, a computer eccentric makes a presidential announcement. This is VOA.
VOA podcasts are a convenient way to get your information on the run.
voanews.com.
Visit voanews.com and click on podcasts to learn how you can subscribe.
You're listening to VOA's International Edition. So far, the 2016 race for the White House is one of the most unconventional in decades, and it's about to become even more so. Computer pioneer and millionaire eccentric John McAfee is tossing his hat in the ring as the head of the newly created Cyber Party. He's promising his will be the first ever purely digital presidential campaign anywhere in the world. International Edition's Doug Bernard spoke about it with Susan Yaki.
Decades back, for those who are not familiar with him, it's likely they're familiar with his name or his product. Decades ago, McAfee was one of the first people to begin working in the field of antivirus to protect people's home computers from malware and hackers and whatnot. This is very non-mainstream. His company became very successful. He became very wealthy, and he sold it to Intel. And he then took off to Central America and began leading a lifestyle that I think most people would charitably describe as eccentric. Many other words have been used to describe it. But he's still always a man of substance and foresight. one person I spoke with said, McAfee has the ability to sort of look around the corner and see problems really before they're in the mainstream view. So it's interesting now that he's taken this moment. He's launched what he's calling the Cyber Party. Its platform is freedom, privacy, and technology. And he is promising to run a very unconventional presidential bid.
Now, is anybody taking him seriously about this?
Oh, I think people are taking him seriously. I don't think the Washington political establishment in any way is taking him seriously. I don't think the two main parties, the Democrats or the Republican Party, are looking at him as a serious challenger. But again, McAfee is a guy who does always seem to be just sort of a little bit a step ahead. And it will be interesting to see if he's able to take this sort of insurgent online candidacy and really maybe begin to have something of an impact, if not in terms of big numbers of votes, then maybe shaping and steering some of the presidential discussions.
So he can get his views out, influence in the game, even if he's not going to be the first one out of the gate.
Exactly so. There is almost 0% chance that he would win the office for the presidency. There's too many factors stacked against an independent run like that. But sort of like we saw some years ago with Ross Perot and some other third-party candidates, I think his biggest contribution, I think, might be getting cyber really maybe to the forefront of candidates' discussions. It's been absent so far in this presidential race.
So is he going to be using Twitter and Facebook and...
Well, even more. He told me in an interview that he gave with VOA that they're building apps and specialized software that will allow people to connect with him instantly. He's already planning what he's calling digital fireside chats, sort of like Franklin Roosevelt, but instead of using the radio, he wants to use the internet to share and actually exchange views with some of his supporters. So I think his is trying and hoping to really innovate and see just what the power of the internet might be able to bring to something as serious as a presidential election.
VOA cyber correspondent Doug Bernard talking with my colleague Susan Yaki. The entire VOA interview with John McAfee can be found on our website at voanews.com. It's called John McAfee, Cyber President. A new film about an ill-fated whaling ship is making its way around the world. In the Heart of the Sea, starring Chris Hemsworth, is about a story that inspired Herman Melville's literary classic Moby Dick. Here's International Edition's David Byrd.
In the autumn of 1820, the whaler Essex and its crew set off to find and harvest whales. Whale oil powered the Industrial Revolution and lighted the world's cities. The Nantucket-based Essex sailed first to South America, but finding the hunting poor, headed to the middle of the Pacific. By November 20th, the ship's crew had harpooned whales, but one of their boats had been damaged. As First Mate Owen Chase, played in the film by Chris Hemsworth, was repairing the damaged boat, a huge male sperm whale rammed and sank the Essex.
Mr. Chase! God damn it. Fine, Mr. Lawrence.
What happened next became the stuff of nightmares. Chase, the Essex's captain George Pollard Jr., and their remaining crew spent 3 months in the middle of the Pacific. Before the survivors were rescued, they would resort to cannibalism to stay alive. To portray their ordeal, Hemsworth, normally known for his massive physique as the Marvel comic hero Thor, had to go on a 500-calorie-a-day diet. A photo of the emaciated Australian actor went viral on Instagram. At the film's premiere, he said that everyone was dedicated to showing the suffering of the men of the Essex.
Yeah, we wanted to sort of show a frame of the film and what we were going through and a portion of sort of what that experience was like. And yeah, it was hard work getting down to that weight for all of us, but we had a pretty tight unit. You know, all the cast were doing it, so it was a lot of support as opposed to doing it on your own.
Tom Holland, who plays young seaman Thomas Nickerson, says that the director, Ron Howard, strove for authenticity in everything, which meant that everyone had to look like they were starving.
This is a true story about real people and we had a duty as actors to do justice to these characters, and Ron made sure that every aspect of this film was authentic, so that meant we had to starve, learn how to sail, really go out to sea. So it was pretty grueling, but all for a good reason.
In the Heart of the Sea is being released as Japan is sending whaling ships to the Antarctic in a controversial culling which Tokyo says is scientific research. Director Ron Howard says his movie does not aim to glorify killing whales, but to reflect its time.
Obviously, you look at our movie through the prism of history, but I think if you also watch it, you'll see that it's not a pro-whaling movie that's meant to romanticize the process. It acknowledges the brutality, but it also recognizes the truth that was the energy industry of its day, and that's kind of a shocking thing to think about.
In the Heart of the Sea also stars Ben Whishaw as a young Herman Melville, who would later use the Essex's sinking as the inspiration for his novel, Moby Dick. The movie is rated PG for violence and thematic elements. In the Heart of the Sea opens in the United States December 11th. In Washington, I'm David Byrd.
That's it for this edition of International Edition. You can get more news, features, videos, and podcasts on our website at voanews.com. Thank you for joining us. I'm Ray Kugel in Washington. Enjoy the day.
Next, an editorial reflecting the views of the United States government.
President Barack Obama recently addressed the American people following the terrorist attack in San Bernardino, California, which left 14 people dead and some 21 injured. This was an act of terrorism, said President Obama, designed to kill innocent people. The United States has been at war with terrorism since al-Qaeda killed nearly 3,000 Americans on 9/11. But over the years, the terrorist threat has evolved into a new phase. Terrorists have turned to less complicated acts of violence, like the mass shootings that have occurred all over the world in recent weeks. The United States has a plan to overcome this evolving threat, said President Obama.
We will destroy ISIL and any other organization that tries to harm us. Our success won't depend on tough talk or abandoning our values or giving in to fear. That's what groups like ISIL are hoping for. Instead, we will prevail by being strong and smart, resilient and relentless, and by drawing upon every aspect of American power.
Specifically, the U.S. military will continue to hunt down terrorist plotters in any country where it is necessary. In Iraq and Syria, airstrikes are taking out ISIL leaders, heavy weapons, oil tankers, and infrastructure. The U.S. continues to train and equip tens of thousands of Iraqi and Syrian forces fighting ISIL on the ground in order to take away their safe havens. U.S. intelligence is working to disrupt ISIL's plots, cut off their financing, and prevent them from recruiting fighters. With American leadership, the international community has begun to establish a timeline to pursue ceasefires and a political resolution to the Syrian war. This strategy to destroy ISIL is supported by U.S. military commanders and counterterrorism experts, together with 65 countries that have joined an American-led coalition. We will succeed in this mission, said President Obama. Americans have always met challenges, whether war or depression, natural disasters, or terrorist attacks, by coming together around our common ideals as one nation, as one people. So long as we stay true to that tradition, I have no doubt America will prevail.
That was an editorial reflecting the views of the United States government.
It's